By accident, she sat next to the Lycan king. He grasped her hand. "Don't move." Its towers rose like jagged teeth against the night sky, and the windows glowed faintly, revealing shadows of figures moving within. Inside, a grand ballroom shimmered with candles and crystal chandeliers. Nobles from every corner of the realm had gathered, their laughter soft under the music of a delicate harp. But for Ilara, the human scholar who had traveled far from her quiet village, the hall felt suffocating. She had come reluctantly, persuaded by letters claiming that her knowledge of ancient scrolls would serve the king. But she had expected dusty chambers and libraries, not this crowded hall where whispers of power and danger floated like invisible mist. Her heart thumped in her chest as she navigated between tall men in fine silks and women whose jeweled gowns sparkled brighter than the candles. Ilara's eyes scanned the room, hoping to find a quiet corner, somewhere she could sit unnoticed. She was small, slight, and often overlooked, which suited her perfectly. She avoided gazes and tried to disappear among the crowd, clutching her notebook tightly. Fate, however, had other plans. A sudden push from a servant carrying a tray sent her stumbling forward. She turned just in time to find a vacant chair, and without realizing it, she sat down at a long, polished table at the very center of the room. And there, at the head of the table, sat Kale, the Lycan king himself. He was enormous, even for a Lycan. His shoulders were broad, his chest strong, and his presence seemed to pull the very air toward him. Dark hair fell over a face sculpted like a warrior from legend, and his golden eyes, eyes that could pierce the deepest secret of a person, turned toward her immediately. For a moment, the world narrowed to just the two of them. Ilara's breath caught. She had heard stories of the Lycan king, how he could summon the wild wolves of the northern forests, how his anger could level entire villages, and how no one dared approach him without invitation. And now here she was, sitting across from him by accident. Kale's gaze was sharp, assessing, yet strangely calm. He noticed something unusual about her, a faint glow in her aura, delicate but persistent. Most humans carried no such trace, and yet this one did. He tilted his head, intrigued. Before Ilara could rise, he reached across the table with a hand that was both gentle and commanding. His fingers closed around hers in a firm grip. "Don't move," he said. His voice was low, almost a growl, yet threaded with a strange warmth that made her pulse quicken. The hall went silent. Nobles and servants froze, sensing the tension between the two. Even the musicians' fingers hovered above their strings. No one dared interrupt the king, and no one dared meet Ilara's eyes. She felt trapped, yet she could not pull away. The warmth of his hand was steady, grounding, but the power behind it was undeniable. I'm sorry," she stammered, her voice barely audible. "I didn't mean." Kale's eyes softened just enough to make her words catch in her throat. He did not let go. "You are here now, sit. Do not try to leave." His tone brooked no argument. Ilara obeyed, curiosity and fear warring within her. She noticed the subtle movement of his muscles beneath the dark fabric of his tunic, the almost imperceptible flicker of his golden eyes as they took her in. There was a history in those eyes, pain and loneliness intertwined with the strength of a ruler. "Who are you?" she whispered, more to herself than to him. Kale's lips curved slightly, though not quite a smile. "You are not like the others," he said. "You carry something unusual." I'm just a scholar," she admitted, though her voice lacked conviction. She had never spoken magic aloud before, and yet something in his presence seemed to see through the ordinary mask she wore. He leaned back slightly, releasing just enough tension to let her hand move, but not fully. "Scholars do not glow. You do." "I sense it." His eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "Why are you here, human? What brings you into my hall?" Ilara swallowed. Should she lie or tell the truth? She chose truth. "I was asked to assist with knowledge of ancient texts. I did not expect to be seated here." Kale's eyes glimmered. "And yet fate has placed you at my table. Perhaps it is no accident." His gaze held hers, steady and unyielding, as if trying to read not only her words but her soul. The room had returned to its gentle hum, yet it felt like a distant noise to Alara. Every other face faded into shadows as she focused on Kale. There was something magnetic, terrifying, and beautiful about him all at once. Her pulse raced in ways she had never experienced. She found herself asking a question she barely understood. Why do I feel drawn to him, even when I know he could destroy me? Kale tilted his head slightly, reading her thoughts as though they were an open book. Curiosity, he said. Do not mistake it for courage, human. Curiosity often invites danger. Yes, she whispered, almost forgetting to breathe. For the next hour they spoke carefully, words measured, guarded. Kale asked questions that seemed to pierce deeper than her answers could hide. He inquired about her travels, her knowledge of magic, her understanding of the world beyond human sight. Every response of hers seemed to draw him closer, and yet the tension never broke. Alara noticed the subtle signs of his Lycan nature, the way his eyes gleamed in the candlelight, the sharpness of his claws beneath the gloves he wore, the way his senses seemed attuned to her smallest movements. A shiver ran down her spine, but it was not entirely fear. It was something more complicated, something dangerous. At one point, a rival noble approached the table, bowing deeply. Kale's hand tightened around hers ever so slightly, and the man faltered. Kale's gaze alone was enough to silence the courtier. Alara realized she was witnessing not just power but the loneliness behind it, the isolation that came with being feared by all who should respect him. "You are quiet," Kale said suddenly, his voice gentle but firm. "Do you always hide so well?" Alara hesitated. Then without thinking, she said, "I observe, I watch, I learn." Kale's golden eyes softened again, and he gave a slow nod. "Then perhaps you see more than most." The conversation was interrupted by the striking of the great clock in the hall. Midnight had arrived, and the room's energy shifted. Masks of nobility and wealth slipped slightly under the pressure of night. Alara realized with a start that she had been caught in a moment far larger than herself. Kale leaned forward just enough for his presence to surround her. "You are not safe here," he said quietly, "and yet I cannot let you leave." Alara's heart leapt into her throat. I don't understand." "You will," he replied, his hand squeezing hers just enough to anchor her in the moment. "But be warned, the world beyond these walls is not gentle, and neither am I." For the first time, Alara felt the full weight of being in the presence of the Lycan king, not just his strength, but his loneliness, his pain, and the shadow of a curse that had isolated him for centuries. She realized that the night had changed something fundamental within her. She had been drawn into a world far larger and darker than she had imagined. The music swelled once more, and Kale's gaze remained locked on her. In that instant, Alara understood something that frightened her almost as much as it thrilled her. She would never be the same again. The night, the palace, the king, everything had shifted. She was caught in a current she could not resist, and the first thread of a dangerous, compelling bond had been woven. And as she looked into his molten gold eyes, she felt it, the undeniable pull of something neither of them could name yet, something that would bind them together in ways neither fear nor reason could undo. The night stretched on, full of whispered secrets, cautious glances, and attention that neither could ignore. When the guests began to leave, Kale finally released her hand. Yet the warmth lingered, a silent promise of what was to come. As Alara stepped away, trying to gather her courage, she heard his voice, low and certain. "Remember this, human, you are not safe, but I will watch over you." And with that, the Lycan king vanished into the shadows of the palace, leaving her trembling, uncertain, and utterly captivated. In that single, fateful night, a chance encounter had become a turning point, and the threads of destiny had begun to weave a story neither of them could escape. The moon shone down as she whispered to herself, her heart both terrified and thrilled. I think I have just met the Lycan King. The shadows of the palace seemed to lean closer, as if aware that the story was only beginning. The moon still hung high over the Lycan kingdom the next evening, but this time it cast a softer glow across the castle's stone corridors. Shadows stretched along the walls, twisting like dark fingers, and the air was thick with the scent of wild herbs and burning candles. Alara walked slowly, her fingers brushing the cold walls as if seeking guidance. She had wandered the castle since the night of the ball, compelled by curiosity and an inexplicable pull toward Kale, the Lycan King. The palace was alive with quiet noises, footsteps echoing in distant hallways, the faint rustle of tapestry, whispers of servants moving unseen. Every corner seemed to hold secrets, and the longer she walked, the more she felt as though the castle itself watched her. And perhaps it did. Kale appeared without warning, his form emerging from the shadows as if he had grown from the darkness itself. Even in the dim light, his presence was commanding. He was taller, broader, stronger than any human she had ever known, and yet there was a gentleness in the way he regarded her. "You should not wander alone," he said, his voice calm but filled with underlying power. "These halls are not safe for a human." I wanted to see," Alara whispered, unsure why she felt the need to justify her actions. "There is so much here, history, secrets." Kale's golden eyes softened just slightly, but his gaze did not waver. "History is dangerous. Secrets even more so." He stepped closer, and the faint scent of pine and iron drifted toward her. "And yet, you are drawn to them." Alara nodded, feeling the truth of it in her bones. She had spent her life seeking knowledge, but this was different. Here in the palace of a Lycan king, knowledge was tangled with power, danger, and something she could not name. Kale studied her for a long moment. Then, with a sudden motion that was both graceful and terrifying, he held out his hand. "Come," he said simply. "I will show you what few are allowed to see." Her heart fluttered, a mixture of fear and anticipation. She took his hand, and the warmth of his touch spread through her, grounding her even as her mind spun with questions. Together, they walked through corridors that twisted like a maze, passing rooms filled with ancient tomes, armor that gleamed in the candlelight, and portraits of Lycan kings and queens who had ruled long before either of them was born. "This castle," Kale said quietly, "holds the history of my people and the burden of my line." Alara glanced at him, noticing the shadows in his eyes. "A burden?" she asked. Kale's jaw tightened. "A curse," he admitted. "Centuries ago, a witch bound my bloodline. Power came with it, yes, but also isolation, loneliness, the fear of what I am." Alara felt a shiver run down her spine. She had heard stories of cursed Lycan kings, but she had never imagined hearing one speak of it so openly. I am sorry," she said softly. "I cannot imagine what that must feel like." Kale's gaze softened. "Few can," he said. "That is why I do not trust easily and why I am intrigued by you. You are different. You do not flinch at the truth, and you do not fear what you do not understand." Alara's cheeks warmed at his words. There was a tension between them, a delicate balance of power and fascination. She had never been this close to someone so commanding, and yet she felt a strange sense of safety in his presence. They entered a room filled with mirrors, their silvered surfaces reflecting moonlight and shadows. Kale stopped in the center, turning to face her. "There is something I must show you," he said. "But it is dangerous. You must be careful." Alara nodded, though her pulse raced. "I will be careful," she promised. Kale raised his hand, and the air shimmered as if alive. The mirrors reflected not only their forms but visions of the past, battles fought, wolves running under moonlight, and Lycan kings standing alone in empty halls. The images were fleeting, but their intensity left Alara breathless. "This is the history of my line," Kale explained. "Every king, every battle, every sorrow, it is all part of the curse. I am bound to protect it, yet it isolates me. No one has touched my life without consequence until you." Ilara's fingers brushed the surface of one mirror, and a faint pulse of light responded to her touch. She gasped softly. What was that?" Kale's eyes widened slightly, and a flicker of something almost human passed across his face, surprise. "You have a gift," he said quietly. "Few humans possess the magic to interact with my world, and you are stronger than you realize." Ilara's mind raced. She had always felt different, but she had never imagined this. "Stronger," she repeated. Kale nodded. "Your presence awakens something that could help break the curse. Or it could bind you to my world forever." His voice dropped, heavy with warning and something else, desire perhaps, or longing. The air between them seemed to thrum with energy. Ilara's heart pounded, and she realized she could not look away from him. There was danger in his eyes, yes, but also a depth of loneliness that called to her. Before she could speak, a distant sound echoed through the hall, a soft, deliberate tapping. Kale stiffened, his wolf senses alerting him to a threat she could not yet perceive. "They are here," he said, his voice low. "Those who would use the curse for their gain. You must be careful, Ilara." Ilara's pulse quickened. What do we do?" Kale reached for her hand again, and the warmth spread through her like fire. "We protect each other," he said simply, "but you must trust me completely." For a long moment she hesitated. Trust was difficult, especially with someone so powerful, so dangerous. Yet something inside her, something stronger than fear, told her she had no choice. She nodded. "I trust you," she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. Kale's lips curved slightly, just enough to show a flicker of approval. "Good," he said, "because tonight you will see the shadows that linger even within these walls." They moved through the castle silently, passing hidden corridors and secret staircases. The walls seemed alive, whispering secrets of the past, and the air grew colder as they descended. Finally, they reached a door carved with runes that glowed faintly under the moonlight. "This room," Kale said, placing his hand on the door, "holds more than history. It holds the truth of the curse and the key to its undoing." Ilara swallowed, feeling a mixture of fear and excitement. I want to see," she said. Kale's eyes softened. "Then step forward. But know this, once you enter, nothing will be the same. Not for me, not for you." The door opened, revealing a room filled with ancient scrolls, glowing crystals, and the faint scent of magic. In the center, a pool of water reflected the moonlight, rippling as if alive. Kale gestured for her to approach. Ilara stepped forward, her reflection mingling with the moonlight. She felt a strange pull, as if the water itself recognized her. Her fingers hovered above its surface, and a soft glow responded to her touch. Kale watched her closely, his expression unreadable. "The magic responds to you," he said. "It is rare for a human to awaken it so easily. You have a destiny here, whether you accept it or not." Ilara's heart raced. "Destiny?" she whispered. Kale nodded. "Yes. And it is tied to me, to this kingdom, to the curse." His hand reached for hers once more, holding it gently above the water. "If you choose to help me, you will face dangers you cannot yet imagine. But together, we may be able to change everything." A shiver ran through her. Fear, yes, but also something else. Something thrilling, something dangerous, something she could not resist. She looked into his golden eyes and saw not just a king, but a man burdened by centuries of pain, yet capable of incredible strength and passion. I will help," she said, her voice trembling but determined. Kale's eyes softened, and for a moment the weight of centuries seemed to lift from his shoulders. "Good," he said, "but be warned, the world outside these walls will not understand our bond. And some will try to destroy it." The room seemed to pulse with energy as the water shimmered under their hands. Ilara felt a connection she could not explain, a pull toward Kale, toward the magic, toward a destiny that was both terrifying and irresistible. Then suddenly a shadow moved across the far corner of the room. Kale tensed instantly, his senses alert. "They are here," he growled. "Enemies of the crown and of you." Ilara's pulse raced. What do we do?" Kale's grip on her hand tightened. We face them together. And in that moment, as the moonlight danced across the pool and the shadows stirred, Alara understood the truth of Kale's earlier words. She was no longer safe. Not from the world, not from the magic, not from the Lycan king who had claimed her hand, and somehow her heart. The shadows moved closer and Kale's golden eyes blazed with power. "Hold my hand, Alara," he said, his voice low and commanding. "Do not let go, not now, not ever." She nodded, gripping his hand as tightly as she could. And as the first threat revealed itself in the flickering candlelight, Alara realized she had crossed a threshold from which there was no turning back. The night had only just begun. The moon had reached its highest point in the night sky, casting silver light over the northern forest that bordered the Lycan kingdom. The trees towered like ancient guardians, their branches entwined in a silent dance with the wind. Shadows moved between the trunks, and the faint rustle of leaves seemed to whisper secrets of long-forgotten magic. Alara walked beside Kale, her hand still pressed into his, feeling the steady strength of the Lycan king beneath her fingers. The air was cool, scented with pine and damp earth, and every step seemed to echo in the stillness of the forest. "This place," Alara whispered, looking around at the glowing flora that seemed almost alive, "it feels magical, like it's waiting for something." Kale's golden eyes scanned the shadows, alert and calculating. "It is," he said. "This forest has protected my ancestors for centuries. It holds power few humans can sense, and tonight it will reveal truths you must see." Alara's pulse quickened. She felt the weight of destiny pressing on her, though she still did not fully understand it. The visions she had glimpsed in the castle, the strange magic responding to her touch, they all led to this moment. Something was about to change, and she could sense it in the very air around them. They reached a clearing where the moonlight pooled like liquid silver. In the center, a circle of ancient stones glowed faintly, runes etched deep into their surfaces. The stones hummed with energy, and the air seemed to thrum in harmony with Kale's heartbeat. "This is the place where the curse began," Kale said, his voice low and heavy. "Centuries ago, a witch bound my line with a spell of power and isolation. It gave strength to my blood, but it demanded a price. Every Lycan king suffers alone for centuries. Few have lived without fear, without loneliness." Alara looked at him, her heart tightening. "And you have suffered too." Kale's gaze fell to the ground, his jaw tense. "I have, every day. The weight of power, the fear of hurting those I care for, it has kept me apart from everyone, even myself." He lifted his head, his eyes meeting hers with a sudden intensity. "Until you," Alara's breath caught. She had never felt someone look at her that way, like she could see into his soul, like he could see hers. She wanted to step closer, to reach out and touch the pain and strength coiled within him, but something in his expression warned her to wait. "Why me?" she whispered. "Why now?" Kale's hand brushed against hers, fingers grazing her knuckles with a tenderness that made her shiver. "Because you carry something rare, a spark, a magic hidden even from yourself. You are the only one who can help me." Alara's mind raced. She had always known she was different, that she could sense things others could not. But to hear Kale speak of it with certainty, it was both terrifying and exhilarating. "You mean I could break the curse?" she asked, her voice trembling. Kale nodded. "Possibly. But it will not be simple. The magic of the curse is old, powerful, and dangerous. To attempt to break it is to step into a world that few survive." Alara swallowed. "And if I fail?" Kale's gaze darkened, and a shadow seemed to pass over his face. "Then the curse remains. And you may be bound to it forever." Her pulse quickened. Fear surged through her, but so did something else. Courage she did not know she possessed. She had come this far. She had touched the magic in the castle, and she could not turn away now. I will try," she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. Kale's lips curved slightly, a flicker of approval passing over his features. "Then you must trust me completely. There is no room for hesitation, no room for doubt." Alara nodded. I trust you." For a long moment they stood together in the silver light, the forest around them alive with silent magic. Then Kale extended his hand, guiding her into the center of the stone circle. The runes glowed brighter, responding to their presence. "Place your hand here," he instructed, pointing to the center stone. "Let your magic flow into it. Do not fear it. Let it guide you." Alara hesitated only briefly before placing her hand on the stone. A warmth spread through her, and a soft light began to emanate from her palm. The runes pulsed in response, and the air around them seemed to hum with energy. Kale placed his hand over hers, and the warmth of his touch mingled with hers. The connection was electric, both grounding and exhilarating. Alara felt a surge of power, a recognition deep within her. This was the magic she had always carried, waiting for this moment to awaken. The stone pulsed brighter and shadows twisted around them. A voice, ancient and distant, echoed through the clearing. "Who dares awaken the bond of the Lycan king?" Kale's eyes narrowed, and his hand tightened over hers. "We do," he said firmly, "and we will not be stopped." Alara felt the energy surge again, stronger this time, as if the forest itself were responding to their determination. The runes glowed brighter, casting silver light across their faces. She felt the connection to Kale deepen, not just through magic, but through something more, something emotional, raw, and undeniable. Then, without warning, the shadows around the circle moved faster, coalescing into shapes that were dark and threatening. Alara's pulse raced. What are they?" she asked, fear rising. Kale's golden eyes blazed. "Those who would use the curse for their gain. They have followed us." The shadows lunged, moving like smoke but solid enough to strike. Kale shifted instantly, his body coiling with strength and power. His eyes glowed, a fierce golden light that reflected his wolf nature. He moved with speed and precision, blocking the first strike with his arm and sending the attackers scattering. Alara's heart pounded, but Kale's voice kept her steady. "Focus on the stone. Let the magic flow through you. Do not fear." She took a deep breath and let her hands guide the energy, feeling it swirl and pulse through her. The light from the stone flared, pushing the shadows back. She felt her courage strengthen with each heartbeat, and with Kale at her side, she realized that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. Together, they fought the encroaching darkness, Kale's strength and her magic blending in perfect harmony. The shadows shrieked and twisted, but could not withstand the bond forming between them. When the last of the attackers dissolved into mist, the forest fell silent once more. The runes dimmed slightly, and the stone pulsed gently under Alara's hand. Kale released her hand slowly, his eyes locking onto hers. "You did well," he said, his voice low but filled with pride. "Your magic, it is strong, stronger than I expected." Alara's chest heaved, her body trembling from adrenaline and exertion. I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted. Kale's gaze softened. "And I could not have done it without you. That is the bond of trust, Alara, the bond that may break the curse or bind us forever." Alara swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words. She had stepped into a world of magic, danger, and destiny, and there was no turning back. Yet beneath the fear there was a thrill, a sense of purpose, and an undeniable connection to Kale. For a moment they stood together in the moonlight, the forest silent but alive around them. The air hummed with energy, the kind that could change worlds or destroy them. Kale reached for her hand again, holding it gently. "You have a choice now," he said softly. "You may return to your world, safe but untouched by the magic, or you may stay, embrace what you are, and face the dangers with me." Alara looked into his golden eyes, seeing centuries of pain, loneliness, and power reflected there. She felt the pull of destiny, the weight of magic, and the stirrings of a bond she could not ignore. I choose to stay," she said, her voice steady. "I want to help. I want to face this with you." Kale's eyes softened, and for the first time a small, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. "Then it begins," he said, "and there will be no turning back." The forest seemed to lean closer, as if aware that their choice had set fate into motion. Magic swirled around them, the silver light of the moon mingling with the glow of the stone. Together, hand in hand, they prepared to face the challenges that awaited them: the curse, the enemies, and the mysteries of the Lycan kingdom. As the first light of dawn touched the horizon, Kale turned to her, his golden eyes unwavering. "Whatever comes next," he said, "know this: you are no longer alone, and I will not let anything harm you." Alara felt a shiver of fear, yes, but also a surge of courage, trust, and something deeper, something dangerous yet exhilarating. The journey ahead would test them both, but she knew with certainty that she had chosen the path she was meant to walk. And as the forest whispered its ancient secrets, Alara understood that the story of the Lycan king, and the magic that bound them, was only beginning. The first light of dawn filtered through the tall windows of Kale's throne room, painting the stone floor in shades of gold and silver. The air was thick with magic, lingering from the forest ritual that had awakened Alara's power. Outside, the wind howled through the mountains, carrying the scent of pine and frost. It was a day that promised change, a day that would decide the fate of the Lycan kingdom and of the two souls who had chosen to face destiny together. Kale stood at the center of the room, his golden eyes focused, his body taut with anticipation. Even without shifting into his wolf form, he radiated power, the kind that could command armies, shake mountains, and bend magic. Beside him, Alara felt both awe and fear. But there was something stronger than either, a shared determination, a bond that had grown from trust, courage, and something more fragile yet fierce: love. "The curse," Kale said, his voice low and steady, "has ruled this kingdom for centuries. It has taken more than it gave, and it will not release its hold easily, but together we can change it." Alara nodded, stepping forward to place her hand on the ancient stone in the center of the throne room. The runes glowed faintly, reacting to her touch. She could feel the magic pulsing within her, alive and aware, reaching for Kale's energy. Their connection was like a river meeting the ocean, powerful, unstoppable, and dangerous. "I'm ready," she said softly, though her heart raced with fear. Kale's hand covered hers, grounding her. "Remember," he said, "this will test everything: our courage, our trust, our hearts. We must face it together or it will destroy us." Alara took a deep breath, letting the magic flow through her. The light from the stone brightened, swirling around them in ribbons of silver and gold. Shadows moved along the walls, twisting and turning, shapes that seemed alive yet indistinct. The curse was awake now, aware of their presence, and it was trying to resist. Kale's golden eyes flared as he spoke, his voice carrying both authority and emotion. "I release you," he said to the curse, his words echoing with power. "No longer shall you control this kingdom or my life. You are bound by nothing but your own limits." The shadows writhed and hissed, gathering strength as if they would strike. Alara felt their pressure, but she did not pull back. She focused on the light in her hand, on the connection with Kale, on the courage that had carried her this far. The runes pulsed faster, responding to her determination. And then Kale shifted, partially into his wolf form. His strength, his senses, his magic, all surged around them like a storm. The shadows recoiled, unable to withstand the combined power of king and human, magic and courage united. "Alara," Kale called, his voice fierce yet commanding, "focus on the bond. Let it guide you. Let it strengthen us both." She felt the surge, the energy flowing from the stone into her, into him, into the room. Fear trembled at the edges of her mind, but she held it steady. She had chosen this path, and she would see it through. The shadows screamed, twisting into forms of past Lycan kings, of enemies long dead, of fears that had haunted Kale for centuries. But Alara's light did not falter. She raised her hand higher, letting the magic bloom like the sun breaking through a storm. Kale mirrored her movements, their energy intertwining, shining brighter and brighter. and then explosion of silver light. The shadows vanished. The runes glowed once more, steady and calm. The throne room was filled with silence, broken only by the sound of their breathing and the faint hum of residual magic. Kale fell to his knees, shifting back into human form. His eyes were golden but softer now, no longer burning with the curse's torment. He looked at Alara, a mix of awe, gratitude, and something tender shining through. You did it," he said, his voice hoarse but steady. "We did it." Alara lowered her hand, still trembling, and nodded. "We broke it." Kale stood slowly, brushing the fatigue from his shoulders, and reached for her hand. "Yes," he said, voice filled with a quiet wonder. "Together." For a long moment they simply looked at each other. The weight of centuries seemed to lift from Kale's shoulders. His loneliness, his fear, his isolation, they were gone, at least in part. He had faced the curse, faced his enemies, and survived. And now he had someone by his side who had chosen to share that burden willingly. "You are remarkable," Kale said softly, his fingers brushing her cheek. "I never imagined a human would hold my hand and walk through this with me." Alara smiled, though her heart still pounded. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said. "You trusted me. You guided me, and you never let go." Kale's eyes softened, and for the first time there was no king, no curse, no power, only the man before her, honest and vulnerable. He drew her closer, their foreheads touching, breaths mingling. "You have changed everything," he said quietly. "Not just the curse, but me. You've awakened something I thought was lost forever." Alara felt warmth spread through her, a mixture of relief, love, and something deeper, something that had been growing since the night they first met. She placed her hands on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palms. "And you've awakened me," she whispered. "Not just my magic, but my courage, my hope." The sunlight crept further into the throne room, bathing them in gold and silver. Outside, the kingdom stirred, sensing the change, sensing that a new era had begun. The curse was broken. The shadows were gone, and Kale was free, not just in power but in spirit. But the story was not over. Danger still lingered in the corners of the world, and enemies would always seek weakness. Kale knew that. Yet for the first time in centuries, he faced it not alone. He took a deep breath, letting the warmth of the morning fill the room. "The kingdom is ours to protect," he said, voice strong and steady. "But we must also protect each other. That is the most important bond of all." Alara nodded, feeling the truth in his words. She had come to this world by accident, yet she had chosen to stay. She had faced magic, danger, and fear, and she had done it with the man who had captured her heart. Kale smiled faintly, a real human smile that reached his eyes. "Do you know," he said softly, "I remember the first night you sat at my table, how I told you not to move." Alara laughed softly, a sound that felt like music in the throne room. "I do. I thought you were terrifying." Kale chuckled, a low, warm sound that made her heart flutter. "I was and I still am, but now you are here, and somehow it feels right." She placed her hand on his cheek, feeling the warmth and the strength beneath his skin. "It does," she said simply. "It feels like home." Kale's golden eyes softened even further. "Then stay," he said, his voice low, filled with both command and plea. "Stay with me, not just as a partner, but as someone who matters, someone I cannot live without." Alara's heart leapt. She had faced fear, magic, and destiny. She had chosen courage and trust. And now she chose love. "I will stay," she said, her voice unwavering. "With you, always." Kale's lips curved into a small, content smile. He took her hand once more, pressing it gently to his chest. "Then we begin," he said, "a new chapter together." The throne room was silent, but the air seemed alive with possibility. The curse was gone. The kingdom would thrive. And Kale and Alara, bound by magic, courage, and love, stood at the center of it all, ready to face whatever the future might hold. The moonlight filtered through the windows one last time, casting a silver glow across their intertwined hands. Outside, the kingdom stirred with new life. and a new era began, not one of fear, not one of curses, but of hope, strength, and love that could survive even the darkest nights. Kale whispered, his voice almost a caress, "I told you you are not safe. Yet somehow with you I feel alive." Alara smiled, leaning into him, knowing that their story had only just begun. Together they had faced shadows, broken curses, and embraced destiny. Together they were unstoppable. And for the first time in centuries, the Lycan King was truly free.